I'm very excited to talk to you all about hacking robot dogs today. Oh my goodness, what is happening? Okay. So the first question I usually get is, holy shit, what is that thing? And so what it is it's a cheap, high-quality robot from China. Both of those words, cheap and high quality, sort of up to the decider, but we'll go into that a little bit. At its core, it's a Linux machine that can get up and walk away from you. And it's based on the MIT Cheetah platform. Now, what it isn't is autonomous. There's no AI built into this except for the movement algorithms, but there's no like mapping. It doesn't have LLMs built in or anything. It's basically just an RC toy out of the box. And it's not a Boston Dynamics ripoff. You see this a lot online. It's based on the MIT Cheetah platform, which is an open source platform developed at Lincoln Labs and MIT. But saying that this is based off of Cheetah is sort of saying Mac OS is based off of Unix, in that it is, that's the core, but they've done a lot more to the industry, and they've done a lot of original research, and I see a lot of people rip on Unitree as a company, saying that they're ripping people off, but they do all of their own work. And what it might be, and what it probably is a spy bot. There's some spyware just kind of built in that's unavoidable, and we'll talk about that. So if you go online, there are 3 models available for the Go. The EDU model is $15,000, and the Air and the Pro models start at about $1,600. When I bought this last year, it was $1,000, so tariffs and everything, it's gone up quite a bit. The Air lacks speakers, ultra-wideband side follow, which I'll talk about. It lacks the AI walk mode, which is like a positionally aware walk mode. It lacks any sort of slam mapping, and it has weaker motors. I have an asterisk next to weaker motors because the motors actually aren't weaker. That's just a lie that they have up on the website. And so asterisk just means this is false. The Air and the Pro together lack software development kit access and secondary development. SDK access and secondary development are a little different from each other. There's the Unitree official software development kit that you can use, but then there's also secondary development, which allows you to train reinforcement models on, so that's the difference there. And then the EDU, really the only difference is that it has a Jetson Nano payload on the back of the robot, which is a 40 TOPS computer that you put on the robot that does all sorts of computation afterwards. But other than that, it has identical hardware to the Pro, which that's a big deal if that's true. So let's look into this a little bit. The Air, it doesn't have a speaker, and I don't care about a speaker. It lacks the UWB side follow, which is like a little LoRa device that you keep in your pocket, and then the robot stays within 3 feet of you. That's rad. I wish that the Air had that. That sucks. But then the AI walk mode, the 3D mapping, the weaker motors, the SDK access, the secondary development, all of that's just software nonsense. That's just things that we can change without having to affect the hardware. And we all know, how hard can that be? So let's go ahead and take a look at the software architecture of the Unitree GO2. So there's a lot going on right here, but in the bottom left-hand corner where it says GO2, that's the robot. And then there's a cloud service up top that it connects to for updates. That's the MQTT, that says MGTT, but that's the MQTT server. And then there's the app that you can control it with. Not shown here is the controller that connects up through Bluetooth. And then there's the external development board and PC. Now there's a lot going on right here. And there's a lot of inroads into the robot and into the system that we could take here, but we're going to focus on one inroad for this talk, and that is the data distribution service. And it's really exciting. It's about as exciting as a data distribution service can be, but it's exciting because it's brokerless, published and subscribed middleware, which means every component in the robot. A robot is a system of components working together. That's what makes a robot a robot. And so every motor, every sensor can communicate with each other through this DDS middleware without having to wait for a publisher to publish an update. It basically treats the robot as a network, and it treats that network as a database. And it writes the information about the sensor positional data, the joint positional data. It writes it into this live database so that any component can hop on at any time and say, hey, where's that sensor looking? Or, you know, how hot am I right now? Without having to wait for a subscriber update, which just means that it works really fast. It mostly uses serial numbers as IDs for those individual components, and that's going to be really, really important coming up. And DDS middleware is used in autonomous vehicle stacks like PX4 and ROS2. ROS2 is the robotic operating system. It sucks, and it's the worst. I could do a whole talk about why ROS2 is terrible, and it's the best thing that we have for robots. The hardware architecture is also pretty interesting. At the center of it all, we have a high-performance CPU, which we'll talk about. And then it's got a geophysical radar module, which is just a LiDAR that spins in the front. It's got the exchange board in the bottom. It's got some other stuff. The Pro and the EDU, they have a voice module. They have speech recognition. The Air lacks that. And the EDU has the exchange board with the Jetson Nano, and the other ones don't have that. This is a picture of the board itself. So the high-performance CPU is a Rockchip 3588S, which is actually dope. Like, it's a really cool board. It's an 8-core CPU. It's an application system on a chip. It's got a GPU built in. It's got an NPU built in, which is a neural processing unit. And so even though it doesn't have AI built in on the system, the NPU, if you open up secondary access, you don't even need an exchange board. It's got enough power to do like really basic YOLO V8 for like image detection. It can run VLAs and VLMs for vision language action models. It's really cool. It's got 8 gigs of RAM. It's got an eMCC solid state storage drive, which we'll be attacking. And it's got a PMIC or power sequencer. So that's kind of the main chip suite. So now that we know a little bit about the robot and we've looked at the specs online, we have one goal in mind, and that is to turn a GO2 Air, a $1,600 robot, into a GO2 Education, which is a $15,000 robot. And so let's do a quick check-in on the Dunning-Kruger curve right now. So knowing everything that we know and being all excited, we're right at about the peak of Mount Stupid. We have a little bit of knowledge, and we have a whole lot of confidence that it can't be that hard. And so it seems like a great time to buy a robot to me. And indeed it is. So this is what it looks like when it comes out of the box in the mail. And so let's get into the robot. So this is it with the back off. Kind of low res, but you can see a lot of open ports, which is always exciting. And so in the bottom left there, you see a red port and a pink port. And those are headers for the speaker and the voice module that aren't there. And so those aren't super duper useful to us. We do have a core UART right in the middle there, which is pretty interesting. We've got another UART below that, and we've got a USB-C port below that. A lot of people have hacked their robots through that USB-C port. Mine has never worked. I don't know if it's something from the factory or if it was a security, something that they did. To me, that port has never reacted. And so we're going to go in through the core UART. And so here's a really boring slide on what UART is. It's an asynchronous serial connection. You got to match up the bit rate and the baud rate and everything. Won't get too far into that, but it's a really simple, really robust way to communicate with electronics. And so for the UART connection, it's pretty simple. On the left there, that's like a $5 1.8 volt USB board. And then on the side there, you can see the transmit to the RX to the transmit, and the ground to ground. And actually, I've got that connector up here someplace if somebody wants to take a look at it after, but that's our main master key into the system. And so here you can see on the right hand, I've got my little ThinkPad, and we're connected up to the robot. And so what we're going to try to do here is interrupt the U-boot. The U-boot is the boot sequence that brings the robot up. And we can learn a lot about it counts down per the boot delay, and it defaults launching into Linux. And I'll give everybody one guess as to what the boot delay was. It was 0, which made this exceedingly difficult. I don't remember exactly how I did it, but you have to hold a USB loader button on the robot and then reset it, and at the same time be hitting Control-C a bunch, and then that interrupts the boot sequence. And as you interrupt the boot sequence, you can then edit the boot arguments, and you can have it start up a shell. And the shell that it opens up just happens to run under PID1, which gives you full root access, which is awesome. And so now that we have root access, let's see what's on the drive. And so if we look at the drive, we see 8 partitions. We've got U-boot, which is what we just talked about. We've got miscellanea, which we have no idea what that's for. Uni, which ends up just being an encryption key that the robot uses. We'll talk about that more at the end. It's got the boot drive, recovery and backup. We know what those are. The root FS is really what we're after, because the root FS is the root file system. So all of the secret sauce on the robot, all of the programs on the robot, the plugins, the services, they're going to be in the root FS. And then there's the user data, and that's going to be stuff like who I am, where I live, pictures of my cat, that sort of thing. And so now we're going to try to dump the root FS. We're connected up. We've got a good UART connection. It's fast enough, so let's try it out. And so that's interesting. We grabbed the root FS image, and the first 32 megabytes seem about right. I mean, there's information there. But then it's all just Cs, just a whole bunch of Cs. And so what's going on here? And it turns out that there's a bug in Rockchip boards where the EMCC only reads the first 32 megabytes. And then after that, it just returns filler bytes. And this is actually a security protocol that Rockchip put on their boards. And so what do we do about that? Oh, it's time to break the limit, which is how it's able to operate. That also allows us to dump the U-boot, decompile it, and patch whatever that limit is. And so over here on the right, we see this is just in a decompiler. There's a conditional b.ls branch that checks an address. And if we change that to b instead of b.ls, it skips the check. And then the 32 megabyte read limit is gone. I don't really know much about that because I have to give all of the credit for that to Dorian Rudolph on GitHub, who was jailbreaking the Pine Note e-reader, which used a similar Rockchip sock, and he did a phenomenal write-up on how to get past this limit. He did all of the work. The Rockchip software is all open source, but he did the decompilation. He found everything, and so me and the other robot hackers, we just followed that and moved on. And so now that that 32 megabyte limit is gone, it's going to be pretty easy. So let's try that one more time. That's what it's supposed to look like. And there's a heck of a lot more than that information. So ladies and gentlemen, we got them. We're in. We've got the root FS. Let's start attacking it. And so now it's time to hack the binaries, as they say. So you take the root FS, you throw it into Ghidra, and then it spits out this nicely organized and nicely laid out set of modules. That's a lie. This took me 3 months. This one slide could be 3 talks in and of itself. I tried to include some stuff on the decompilation process, on what it took for me and the 12 other glasses-pushing turbo nerds to take the root FS into something that we could read. I couldn't figure out a way to do it that I felt comfortable, disseminating that information with my level of expertise. So we get one slide for hacking the binaries. But on the right there, we see all of the modules. This is the robot. So let's go ahead and take a look at the architecture there. This is a little hard to read, but we see a lot happening. We have the external interfaces up top, which is the remote control, the app on your phone, and the cloud updates, which is the spyware. The communication layer communicates through WebRTC, which is really cool. I wish I could talk about it, but I don't have time. Cyclone DDS, which is what we're talking about here, Bluetooth, etc. But we see on the bottom the communication, the AI motion control, the hardware interfaces. Everything is sort of talking to this master service that lies under the service management sort of vibe. And so the master service is what we're going to be taking a look at. So inside the root FS and inside the master service, there's a bit here that determines if a device qualifies as an EDU model in the app and in the SDK. All it does is read an 8-digit version string and checks whether the last 2 digits is 4. And so that's going to be pretty easy to at least flip that switch to make the app think that it's an EDU model. So we'll be able to do handstands, and we'll be able to do slam mapping, and all of the stuff that is locked in the app to EDU models only, we'll now be able to do on this theoretically. But the master service does a lot more. And the next 2 slides, they're not actually part of the jailbreak, but it's just really cool. And so we're going to talk about it for a little bit. The secret management on this robot, I thought, was pretty rad. So the serial numbers, the country codes, everything like that, everything that the DDS middleware uses to communicate with itself, that's stored on the MCU, which is a physically separate chip from the CPU. It's the motor control unit. All of the information is pulled over a secure I/O. The sensitive data is RSA encrypted and decrypted at runtime. And thankfully, the rootfs that we patched, quote unquote, it destroys a public key, but the basic service repopulates those files on first boot. So if we just ignore them, everything works. And now on the right here, you can see the decompilation of the sort of secret handling. I don't know about you guys, that's a little bit too much for me to read, so I'll break it down a little bit. So the secret handling, this is when the robot boots up. It does a handshake that gives it 3 seconds to get ready. It does a public key file check and recreates the public key if it's missing or corrupted, which is very handy for us, which we were just talking about. And then it encrypts that says product key, but it encrypts the public key, and then it generates 2 buffers and it decrypts them both. And so you're encrypting the same thing twice and then decrypting the same thing twice, and you're doing a byte-to-byte analysis on that to make sure that they're the same. And this is a really cheap and easy way to prevent memory issues, like if you have a bad RAM module, but also it prevents like sideband attacks, and it prevents glitching, and it prevents all sorts of intrusion that would make it so that this double decryption doesn't quite work the way that you want it to work. And then once it executes and it decides that everything's fine, it does a scatter copy where it breaks up the code and it sends the serial numbers to everything that needs serial numbers, and it sends the country codes to everything that needs country codes. And so all of the secrets and all of the sensitive stuff get sort of vomited out at the beginning there. And so I thought that was pretty cool, but we'll get back to the jailbreak. We now have all of the tools at our disposal to replace the root file system, which is basically the easiest route forward to make this thing into an EDU model. So the first step there is to dump and convert. We use a tool called RK Develop Tool, which is just the debugging software for the system on a chip family that we have. Really easy to use and free. We use that to read the rootfs partition. We convert it into something that we can mount, and then we mount it. We chroot into it. We do a little patch and configure like a UPS truck. We add our SH keys, change the root password while we're in there. We repack the image, and then we flash and boot. The repacking of the image step. So my day job, I'm a DevOps engineer and MLOps engineer. So I do image packing, I do builds, I do CI/CD pipelines. This was the biggest pain in the ass to repackage that I've ever dealt with. I can't even describe how sensitive the image was to any sort of bit that was off. So me and a whole bunch of people way smarter than I had to figure out which buffers to add here and there. And after 2 months of work, we were finally able to repackage the image, and then we can flash it and boot it. And so let's see what we've got. We put it all together. And there we go. So in the background, we have the ROS2 topic list, which is running on the dog. It shows us all of the APIs that are available. That indicates to us that we have SDK access, official SDK access. And then in the foreground, we have the secondary development status. This is the GO2 firmware tools made by a really, really just incredibly gifted hacker named Legion. He runs the Roboverse Discord, where a lot of this work was done. And he develops these GO2 firmware tools for secondary development. And so we can see we've got secondary development status enabled. And one way to test that out for sure, this is an illegal maneuver. You cannot do this on an air because the motors are too weak. You can't do a handstand and jump around. But here's a picture of the robot doing a handstand and jumping around. So that was the adventure into jailbreaking this robot. Now there's so much that we didn't even talk about, and so much that I wish that I could have talked about. WebRTC, Web Real-Time Connection. It is a plug-in, free way to connect in real time to robots and other devices. Every modern browser has WebRTC built in. It's really slick. And there are some really gifted programmers who are developing software interfaces for this robot using just the WebRTC connection that they've intercepted from the app. And you can control the robot, you can control high-level state without even, like these little pet and these little home robots, which are like super cheap, and you can buy them on Amazon. And they're basically, we all know how insecure IP cameras are, and so I really like the idea of breaking into one of these and just seeing how much mischief you can get into with an IP camera that you can have move around. And now, why you should be hacking robots. Us as cybersecurity professionals, we're no strangers necessarily to dealing with things that will have real-world consequences in the real world. But if you compromise a robot employee, it's like you're taking over a man on the inside. It is a physical body that you can now control and move around. You can knock somebody over. You can, spy on people with the robot. It's when you open up a robot, I feel like it opens up the whole physical space around you, and there's a lot of implications there. And then also for robots to work, you have to have a lot of data. And so they all have cameras, they all have LiDAR, they all have IMUs. And you can use those to capture layouts, to capture routines and movements of agents, both robot and human. And you can sort of silently gather a lot of data that you would not be able to gather just from cameras or just from computers. And then most importantly, we, as in the nerd community, are shoving AI into robots as fast as possible. This is the project that I'm working on the most these days, is VLAs and VLMs. Excuse me, vision language action models and vision language models. And you're basically adding like as motor control. And I'm not sure if anybody's ever tried to jailbreak an LLM, but like it's not really that hard to get an LLM to do something that it's not supposed to do. Like Claude isn't supposed to help you hack things, but Claude helps me hack things all the time. Claude helps me hack this robot. And so if you can convince a otherwise pretty dumb LLM to do something, you've now taking like third place in modern day robotics. And so I feel like it's not only an important thing for us as ethical hackers to explore, but it's also like a really fun and easy thing for us as ethical hackers to explore. And so let's do one last check-in on where we are at the Dunning-Kruger effect curve. Now that we've gone through this and we've learned all a little bit about it, I think I'm just beyond the slope of enlightenment. I've just hit that inflection point. And I wanted to take a moment here just to talk about something that affected me and a lot of other people during this project, which is the imposter syndrome. And I should say, I'm not some genius robot hacker who figured this all out by himself. I worked with 20 or 30 really, really intelligent, really weird people all across the world. We were all working on hacking this dog in the same Discord, and it was moving so fast, and I can't give enough credit to enough people, but this was not a solo endeavor. And still, I felt like an absolute idiot for 85% of this. Everything was hard. Everything was harder than it should have been. Nothing worked the first time. I've been hacking now professionally for 12 or 13 years, depending on who you ask. And I felt like I was getting behind a computer for the first time, pretty much every time I launched into this dog. Something about hardware hacking that they say start cheap because you're gonna brick something. I bricked this dog, which sucks because it's at the time it was a $1,000 robot. And I bricked it, and I got to the other side of it, but I spent a lot of time thinking that nothing was happening. And the most insidious part of that is when something did happen, me and the other guys, we didn't feel good about it. We're just like, oh, well, that's something that I've been trying to give myself grace on, is as you make improvements and as you increment on your project, you need to identify that that's an impressive thing and use that as, as fuel onward, because otherwise you're just going to feel like you're not making any progress. But the robot's hacked. We can do whatever we want with it now. And so, even though it was a really tough time, we made it through to the other end. So, anybody have questions? All right. I will go ahead and turn the robot on so y'all can see it jump around and whatever.
I'll take the mic from you so I can stop the stream.
Sweet.
Excellent. It'll be like 1 minute because it's just a little slow. But